The night belonged to ghosts. General Garrett Ironhall stood alone on the eastern rampart of Fort Belvoir, 10 miles south of Washington, D.C., and watched the horizon burn with distant firelight. December cold cut through his uniform, but he didn't move, couldn't move, because stretched across the Maryland countryside from one edge of darkness to the other, campfires flickered like fallen stars. 60,000 of them, maybe more. He'd spent 45 years on this earth, 27 of them in uniform. He'd seen combat in 3 continents, commanded men through hell itself, watched friends die in his arms, but he had never seen anything like this. The Dominion had arrived. Behind him, soldiers whispered prayers they thought he couldn't hear. Young men, most of them. Boys, really, 18, 19, 20 years old. They'd grown up hearing stories about the Dominion the way children once feared monsters under their beds. Except these monsters were real. These monsters had conquered 70% of the planet in 15 years. And now they were here, 10 kilometers from the White House, close enough to see the Capitol dome on a clear day, close enough to smell the Potomac River, close enough to hear church bells ringing in Georgetown, close enough to end everything. Ironhall's jaw tightened. His hand found the railing, knuckles white against rusted metal. The scars on his neck, purple and thick, souvenirs from the Battle of Manitoba, pulsed with phantom pain. They always did before combat, as if his body remembered trauma before his mind could catch up. A young lieutenant approached, couldn't have been more than 22, Thompson or Thomason. Ironhall had stopped learning names after Manitoba, after watching 300 men die in 4 hours. "Sir," the kid's voice cracked, "Central Command is asking for status update." "Tell them I'm looking at the end of the world, Lieutenant. Ask them what status report they want for that." The lieutenant hesitated, swallowed hard. "Sir, they're saying President Ravencroft wants you in the Situation Room. Immediately." Ravencroft. The name tasted like copper in Ironhall's mouth, like blood, like betrayal. "Tell the President I'll be there when I'm done counting our enemies." "Sir," he was very clear, "so am I." Ironhall turned, and the lieutenant took an involuntary step back, not from anger, from something colder. "Dismissed." The boy fled. Alone again, Ironhall returned his gaze to those distant fires. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, beyond the Maryland pines, Commander Aldrich Wolfborn was planning the death of everything Ironhall had spent his life protecting. A man he'd never met, a man whose father had built an empire on the bones of 40 million corpses. 40 million. The number stopped meaning anything after the first million. After the first 100,000, after the first 1,000, it became abstract, became statistics, became just another briefing slide in the Situation Room. But Ironhall remembered when numbers were still people. He remembered Berlin, 2022. He'd been there as a military observer when the Dominion came. He remembered the refugee column stretching for 50 miles. Remembered mothers carrying dead children because they had nowhere to bury them. Remembered the smell of a city burning, not wood or gasoline, but something worse, the smell of civilization dying. He remembered Warsaw, 2023, the massacre that broke NATO's spine. 65,000 soldiers dead in a single afternoon. The Dominion lost 200 men, 200. The casualty ratio was so absurd that intelligence agencies spent 6 months trying to prove the numbers were propaganda. They weren't. Ironhall had read the after-action reports, had studied the battle footage until his eyes bled, had watched over and over as Dominion forces executed what military historians now called the most perfect feigned retreat in modern warfare. NATO commanders saw their enemy running, saw victory within reach, ordered the pursuit, and died screaming when the trap closed around them. The tactic was ancient. Mongols used it 800 years ago. Simple, brutal, almost impossible to counter, even when you knew it was coming. Because in the chaos of battle, when you see your enemy fleeing, every instinct screams at you to chase them down, to finish them, to win. That's what makes it so perfect, and that's what made the Dominion unstoppable. Until Manitoba. Ironhall touched his neck scars again. Spring 2026 felt like a lifetime ago. The Dominion had pushed through Alaska, through western Canada, testing American defenses with a 20,000-man expeditionary force. They expected to roll through the northern territories the way they'd rolled through Scandinavia, through Eastern Europe, through Asia. Instead, they ran into Garrett Ironhall. He'd studied their tactics, spent 2 years doing nothing but analyzing Dominion battle patterns, learning to think like them, learning to predict their moves 3 steps ahead. When they deployed the feigned retreat at Manitoba, he was ready. He didn't take the bait, held his line, let them run, waited. And when their flanking forces emerged from the forests, expecting to find scattered American troops, they found prepared defensive positions instead, anti-armor emplacements, artillery coordinates already locked in, drone countermeasures active. 20,000 Dominion soldiers went into Manitoba. 3,000 came out. The news feeds called it a miracle. Called Ironhall the American Shield. Talked about him like he was some kind of superhero, some savior who'd finally cracked the Dominion's invincibility code. But Ironhall knew the truth. He'd just gotten lucky. Lucky that the Dominion commander was overconfident. Lucky that the terrain favored defense. Lucky that his supply lines held, and his communications didn't fail, and his troops didn't panic when the first hypersonic missiles started falling. Luck, and luck runs out. It almost ran out at Fort Siveston, fall of 2027. The Dominion had captured a strategic base in Montana, dug in deep, looked ready to establish a permanent foothold in American territory. Ironhall force-marched 15,000 troops 400 miles in 6 days. His men slept 3 hours a night, ate rations on the move, developed frostbite and trench foot, and didn't complain because they knew what was at stake. They surrounded the fort, cut off supply lines, waited. The Dominion could have held for months, should have, had enough food, enough ammunition, enough defensive advantages to make any assault a bloodbath. But Ironhall didn't assault. He waited, played music over loudspeakers, American music, blues, jazz, rock and roll. Reminded the Dominion soldiers that they were 10,000 miles from home, surrounded by an enemy that wasn't going anywhere, dying for a cause that would forget their names before their bodies grew cold. Psychological warfare. It worked. The Dominion commander surrendered after 3 weeks. Ironhall brought him back to Washington in chains, paraded him through the streets like a Roman triumph. The media loved it. Ravencroft loved it. America needed a win, needed a hero, needed proof that the Dominion could bleed. But victories like Manitoba and Siveston weren't enough, because they were defensive wins, tactical successes, the kind of battles that slow down an empire, inconvenience it, make it think twice. They don't stop it. And now the Dominion was here, not a 20,000-man raiding party, not a garrison holding a single fort. The full weight of their war machine, commanded by Aldrich Wolfborn himself, Supreme Chancellor Magnus Wolfborn's only son, the prince of an empire that had crushed everything in its path for 15 years. 60,000 troops, maybe more. The satellites couldn't get an accurate count because the Dominion had learned to disperse their forces, to hide under thermal camouflage, to move in patterns that confused orbital reconnaissance. But Ironhall didn't need satellites to know the truth. This wasn't a raid. This was the end. One way or another, the war would be decided here, in Maryland, 10 kilometers from the heart of American democracy. His encrypted radio crackled. "Ironhall, this is Ravencroft. I'm not asking again. Get to the Situation Room, now." The voice carried that particular edge Ironhall had learned to recognize over the past 2 years. Not quite anger, not quite fear. Something in between. The voice of a man who'd murdered his way to power and couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. Not ever. Ironhall keyed the radio. "On my way, Mr. President." He took one last look at those distant fires. Somewhere out there, Aldrich Wolfborn was probably looking back toward Washington, probably smiling, probably planning which monuments to burn first. "Not today," Ironhall whispered to the darkness. "Not while I'm still breathing." He turned and walked into the night. The White House Situation Room sat 3 levels underground, behind blast doors thick enough to survive a direct nuclear strike. It smelled like recycled air and old coffee and the particular brand of sweat that comes from men making decisions that will kill thousands of people. Satellite feeds covered every wall. Thermal imaging, troop movements, real-time casualty projections. The technology was state-of-the-art, cutting-edge, the kind of hardware that cost taxpayers billions of dollars. None of it mattered, because no amount of technology could change the fundamental math of warfare. The Dominion had more soldiers, better equipment, superior tactics, and an unbroken string of victories stretching back 15 years. America had Garrett Ironhall and Thaddeus Ravencroft. The president stood at the head of the conference table, 40 years old but looking a decade older. Gray had crept into his temples over the past 2 years, since the coup, since the murder. His hands gripped the table edge hard enough that the wood groaned. Presidential seal on his jacket, American flag pin on his lapel, all the trappings of legitimate authority. But Ironhall remembered the blood. November 2025, Camp David. Thanksgiving dinner that turned into a massacre. Ravencroft had invited his uncle, President Jonathan Ravencroft, for a quiet family holiday. Turkey, stuffing, pumpkin pie. 3 generations of Ravencrofts sitting around a table, talking politics and football and the weather. And then Thaddeus Ravencroft stood up, walked to his uncle's chair, and put 2 bullets in the back of his head. Ironhall wasn't there. Nobody was, except Ravencroft's personally selected Secret Service detail. But he'd read the forensic reports, seen the crime scene photos, knew exactly what happened that night. 17 people died at Camp David. President Jonathan Ravencroft, Vice President Margaret Hartley, 3 senators who'd come for the holiday, White House Chief of Staff, National Security Advisor, their spouses, their children. All dead, all murdered by the man who now wore the presidential seal and talked about defending democracy. Thaddeus Ravencroft hadn't even tried to hide it. Rode back to Washington that same night, blood still on his shoes, and declared martial law. Claimed the Dominion had infiltrated the highest levels of government. Claimed his uncle was about to surrender America to enemy control. Claimed he'd acted to save the Republic. Congress demanded an investigation. Ravencroft arrested Congress. The media called it a coup. Ravencroft shut down the media. Within 72 hours, Thaddeus Ravencroft controlled every lever of power in the United States government. Within a week, anyone who might challenge his authority was either in prison, in hiding, or in the ground. And Garrett Ironhall, who'd spent his entire adult life defending the Constitution, who'd sworn an oath to protect America from enemies foreign and domestic, did nothing. Because Thaddeus Ravencroft was right about one thing. 1. President Jonathan Ravencroft had been planning to negotiate with the Dominion, had been preparing to offer territorial concessions in Alaska and Hawaii in exchange for a peace treaty, had genuinely believed that accommodation was possible, that the Dominion could be reasoned with, that there was a diplomatic solution to a military problem. He'd been wrong. The Dominion didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, didn't accept anything less than total surrender. Jonathan Ravencroft's peace initiative would have been interpreted as weakness, would have encouraged the Dominion to accelerate their invasion timeline, would have gotten millions of Americans killed. Thaddeus Ravencroft understood that. So he killed his uncle, seized power, transformed America into a military dictatorship designed for one purpose: survival. And Garrett Ironhall, who should have arrested him, who should have stopped him, who should have upheld his oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, made a choice. He chose to serve a tyrant rather than watch his country die. God forgive him. General Ironhall, Ravencroft's voice cut through the silence. Thank you for joining us. The sarcasm was subtle but present. Around the table sat what remained of America's military leadership. General Silas Stonemark, heavy cavalry commander, 60 years old, and missing his left eye from the Battle of Berlin. Colonel Evelyn Winterbourne, left flank specialist, brilliant tactician with ice in her veins. Winston Graydon, chief of staff, bureaucrat, and survivor who'd managed to stay alive through 3 administrations and 1 coup. All of them looked at Ironhall with the same expression: hope, fear, desperation. He was their best chance, their only chance. The man who'd beaten the Dominion twice when everyone said it was impossible. Ironhall took his seat, said nothing. Ravencroft gestured to the satellite feeds. Intelligence confirms 60,000 Dominion troops at Kensington, Maryland. Commander Aldrich Wolfborn is personally leading the force. They arrived 4 hours ago and have made no aggressive moves toward the city. No bombardment, no reconnaissance probes. They're just sitting there. Waiting for us to make the first move, Winterbourne said. Her voice carried a slight British accent, remnant of a childhood spent in London before the Dominion burned it to ash. Classic siege psychology. Let the defenders stew in their fear. Let panic spread through the civilian population. Force us to act. Graydon cleared his throat. Mr. President, I must reiterate my recommendation. We should not engage in open battle. The defensive advantages of Washington's fortifications are substantial. If we force them to conduct urban warfare, they'll level the city block by block, Ironhall interrupted, his first words since entering the room. The Dominion doesn't do urban combat. They reduce cities to rubble and call it pacification. You want to turn D.C. into Warsaw, into Berlin, 3 million civilians trapped in a meat grinder? Better than losing our entire army in a single afternoon, Graydon shot back. Gentlemen, Ravencroft's voice carried steel beneath the civility. The decision isn't whether to fight. It's how. General Ironhall, your assessment. Ironhall stood, walked to the satellite display, stared at those thermal signatures marking Dominion positions. They marched 6 months to get here, he said quietly. Alaska to Montana, Montana to the Dakotas, Dakotas to Minnesota, Minnesota to Wisconsin, Wisconsin to Illinois, Illinois to Indiana, Indiana to Ohio, Ohio to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania to Maryland, 3,000 miles. And they didn't stop once, didn't capture a single city, didn't loot, didn't pillage, just marched. He turned to face the room. Why? Silence. Because this isn't about conquest, Ironhall continued. It's about symbolism. Aldrich Wolfborn didn't come here to add territory to his father's empire. He came here to prove something. To himself. To his father. To the world. He came here to break America's will to resist. One battle. One decisive victory. Capture Washington. Parade our president through the streets in chains, and watch the rest of the country crumble from within. Ravencroft's jaw tightened. You're saying he wants me specifically. I'm saying he wants a spectacle. Ironhall met the president's eyes. Kings fight kings. That's how empires prove their legitimacy. If you hide behind walls, if you send me to fight in your place, Aldrich wins the propaganda war even if he loses the battle. He'll tell the world that America's president was too cowardly to face him. Every state governor from Texas to Maine will interpret that as weakness. Rebellions will break out within months. The Union will fracture, and the Dominion won't even need to conquer us because we'll destroy ourselves. The room held its breath. Ravencroft stared at Ironhall for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You want me to ride out and meet them in open battle? Svim? I want you to be the president this country needs, Ironhall said. Not the one it deserves. Another silence. Longer this time. Stonemark broke it. General Ironhall is correct. This is about more than military tactics. It's about national unity, about proving that America still has leaders willing to stand and fight. Winterbourne nodded. But we need to be smart about it. The Dominion has never lost a major engagement. Their tactical superiority is... I've beaten them twice, Ironhall said. Defensive engagements, Winterbourne countered. Manitoba was favorable terrain. Seveston was a siege. This is different. This is meeting them in open field. This is playing to their strengths. So we adapt. Ironhall returned to the satellite display. The battlefield at Kensington has natural constraints. Potomac River to the west. Rock Creek Forest to the east. Limited width. They can't use their full flanking capabilities. We can negate some of their tactical advantages. Graydon leaned forward. And if we lose? If they execute another Warsaw? Then we lose, Ravencroft said quietly. But we lose fighting, not hiding, not negotiating, not surrendering. We lose like Americans. He stood, walked to the display, stared at those Dominion positions. My uncle would have negotiated, he said. Would have offered them Alaska, Hawaii, maybe even California. Would have believed he was saving lives through diplomacy. And the Dominion would have smiled, accepted his concessions, and invaded anyway, because they don't respect weakness. They exploit it. Ravencroft turned to face his generals. I killed my uncle because I understood something he never could. Sometimes the only way to save a nation is to become the monster it needs. Sometimes you have to make choices that history will judge harshly. Sometimes you have to sacrifice your soul to protect your people's future. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm already damned, already a murderer, already a tyrant. History will remember me as the president who stole power through blood. Fine, let them. But they'll also remember that I stood and fought when the Dominion came, that I didn't hide, didn't surrender, didn't betray everything America represents. He looked at Ironhall. Tomorrow morning we march to Kensington, full army, presidential standard flying. We meet Aldrich Wolfborn on the field of battle, and we either win or we die trying. Ironhall held his gaze, saw the determination there, the fear, the guilt, the absolute certainty of a man who'd murdered 17 people and convinced himself it was necessary. Maybe it was. Maybe history would prove Thaddeus Ravencroft was right to kill his uncle. Maybe the coup saved America. Maybe tyranny was the only answer to an existential threat. Or maybe Ironhall was just making excuses for serving a dictator because the alternative was watching his country burn. He'd probably never know. Yes, Mr. President, Ironhall said. Tomorrow we fight. The meeting dissolved. Generals scattered to prepare their commands. Ironhall lingered, staring at the satellite feeds. Ravencroft approached, stood beside him in silence. You think I'm a monster, the president said finally. I think you're what this moment requires, Ironhall replied. Whether that makes you a monster or a savior, I'll let history decide. You could have stopped me 2 years ago, after Camp David. You had the authority, the respect, the military backing. You could have arrested me, could have restored constitutional order. And while America tore itself apart in civil war, the Dominion would have walked through our front door unopposed. Ironhall finally looked at Ravencroft. I made my choice. I serve you because the alternative is extinction. But don't mistake my service for approval. Ravencroft nodded slowly. Fair enough. He paused. If I die tomorrow, you won't. But if I do, I want you to know. The things I've done, the people I've killed, it wasn't about power. It was about survival. Yours, mine, America's. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just understanding. Ironhall said nothing for a long time. Then, tomorrow we fight. That's all that matters now. He left Ravencroft alone in the Situation Room, surrounded by screens showing an empire's armies camped at the gates of democracy. Outside, Washington slept uneasily. Refugees clogged the streets, fleeing south toward Virginia. Markets had closed, shelves emptied by panic buying. Churches and mosques and synagogues overflowed with people praying for deliverance. Ironhall walked through the darkened streets, past families huddled in doorways, past soldiers saying goodbye to loved ones, past monuments to presidents and heroes who'd never faced a threat like this. He thought about tomorrow, thought about the Battle of Kensington, thought about the moment when he'd have to look Aldrich Wolfborn in the eye and decide whether to live or die for a tyrant who'd murdered his way to power. The answer should have been simple. But nothing about this war was simple. Nothing about survival ever was. Somewhere in the darkness, 60,000 Dominion soldiers sharpened their weapons and prepared to write the final chapter of American independence. And Garrett Ironhall, the American shield, the man who'd beaten the unbeatable, walked alone through streets that might not exist in 24 hours. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow we see if miracles happen twice. Tomorrow we see if one man's courage can stop an empire. Tomorrow we learn the price of freedom. But morning would belong to warriors. Dawn broke over Maryland like a wound opening in the sky. Red, bleeding, beautiful and terrible. 50,000 American soldiers marched north from Washington toward Kensington, and the sound of their boots on icy earth was like thunder rolling across the land. No music, no drums, just the steady rhythm of men walking toward their deaths. Garrett Ironhall rode at the head of the right flank. 12,000 troops stretched behind him in perfect formation. Mixed force, regular army, National Guard. Civilian volunteers from Virginia who'd never held a rifle before 3 months ago, but who'd learned fast because learning slow meant dying. The presidential standard flew at the center column, gold eagle on blue field. Thaddeus Ravencroft rode beneath it, surrounded by his personal guard. 10,000 elite troops whose only job was to keep the president alive, whose only purpose was to ensure that if America died today, it died with its leader standing. To the left, Colonel Winterbourne commanded another 12,000. To the front, General Stonemark held the vanguard position with the heavy mechanized infantry. Behind them, artillery units and drone countermeasure teams and medical corps that would be overwhelmed within the first hour of fighting. Everyone knew it. Nobody said it. The Kensington Plains stretched ahead, flat and brown and dead. Winter had killed the grass. Frost sparkled on the ground like diamonds, like broken glass. The Potomac River curved along the western edge, dark water moving slow and cold. Rock Creek Forest bordered the east, bare trees standing like skeletal fingers reaching toward heaven. And between the river and the forest, on ground barely half a mile wide, two armies prepared to decide the fate of a continent. The Dominion waited. 60,000 troops arrayed in geometric perfection. No flags, no standards. Just endless rows of soldiers in gray and black armor that made them look like chess pieces, like something manufactured rather than human. Artillery positioned on slight rises, drone platforms hovering in clusters, mobile command centers disguised as supply trucks. And at the center, on a small hill that gave him view of the entire battlefield, Commander Aldrich Wolfborn sat on horseback. 38 years old, son of the man who'd conquered half the planet, carrier of a legacy written in blood and fire. He wore no special uniform, no ceremonial armor, nothing to distinguish him from his troops except the way every soldier in that vast army oriented themselves toward him like flowers toward the sun. Ironhall pulled his binoculars, focused on that distant figure, saw Wolfborn raise his own binoculars. For a moment, across half a mile of December ground, the two commanders studied each other. Two men who'd never met, who'd never spoken, who would kill each other today or die trying. Wolfborn lowered his binoculars first, raised one hand, made a single gesture. The Dominion line shifted, subtle, precise, like watching a machine recalibrate. "They're moving into engagement formation," Winterbourne's voice crackled over encrypted radio. "Flanking units dispersing to probe our weaknesses." "Let them probe," Ravencroft responded. "We hold position. We wait for them to commit." Ironhall said nothing. Watch the Dominion rearrange itself with the kind of coordination that came from years of victory. They moved like water, like something alive. Every unit in perfect sync with every other unit. This was what unstoppable looked like. "All units," Ravencroft's voice cut through the silence. "Remember why we're here. Remember what we're protecting. 3 million civilians 10 miles behind us, 20 million more in cities stretching to the Atlantic. 300 million Americans counting on us to hold this line. He paused. The Dominion has never lost a major engagement. They've crushed every army they've faced for 15 years. Today, we show them what happens when they face Americans who refuse to surrender. Today, we prove that freedom is worth dying for. Today, we make history. Ironhall almost smiled. Ravencroft had always been good with words. Good at making murder sound like patriotism. Good at convincing people that his tyranny was necessary. Maybe it was. The sun climbed higher, 8 in the morning, 9, 10. Neither army moved. This was the game. The psychological warfare. Whoever attacked first showed weakness, showed desperation, showed fear. So they waited. American soldiers stood in formation, feeling cold seep into their bones. Dominion troops sat motionless, conserving energy. Hours passed like centuries. At noon, the first Dominion probe began. A unit of 500 soldiers peeled off from the main Dominion line, moved toward the American right flank, Ironhall's position. Not a full assault, just a test. Poking at defenses, looking for soft spots. "Hold fire," Ironhall commanded. "Let them come." The Dominion unit advanced to 400 meters, 300, 200, stopped, turned around. Marched back to their lines, testing engagement range, measuring American discipline, gathering data. "They'll do that 6 more times," Winterbourne said over radio. "Different angles, different distances, building a tactical profile." She was right. Over the next 2 hours, the Dominion sent 7 more probing attacks, each one testing a different section of the American line, each one retreating before actual engagement, each one gathering intelligence, learning patterns, identifying weaknesses. Standard doctrine. By 2 in the afternoon, Aldrich Wolfborn knew everything he needed to know about American defensive capabilities. Now he'd exploit them. The 8th probe came at Ironhall's right flank again. 3,000 troops this time. Led by a captain whose name Ironhall would later learn was Draven Murdoch, Scottish mercenary, former SAS, before the Dominion conquered Britain. Man who'd personally killed 400 NATO soldiers at Warsaw. This wasn't a probe. This was harassment. Murdoch's unit advanced to 200 meters and stopped. Deployed drone swarms, small quadcopters armed with shaped charges and autonomous targeting. They rose into the air like a swarm of mechanical hornets. 50 drones, then 100, then 200. They screamed toward the American line. "Countermeasures active," Ironhall's lieutenant reported. "EMP protocols engaging." The American anti-drone systems fired. Electromagnetic pulses rippled through the air, frying circuits, dropping drones like dead birds. But not all of them. 30 drones made it through, found targets, exploded. 50 American soldiers died in the first strike, bodies torn apart, screams cut short, blood on winter soil. Ironhall's jaw clenched. His troops held formation, didn't break, didn't panic, but he saw the rage building in their faces. Murdoch's unit deployed another drone wave, 100 more soldiers dead. "Sir?" His lieutenant's voice shook with fury. "Request permission to return fire." "Denied," Ironhall said. "Hold the line." Another wave. 70 dead this time, young men who'd kissed their wives goodbye that morning. Fathers who'd promised their children they'd come home. Boys who'd lied about their age to enlist because they believed in something bigger than themselves. Dead. For nothing. Because Ironhall wouldn't let them fight back. "General," the lieutenant wasn't asking anymore, "we can't just stand here and die." "You will hold your position, soldier." Another wave. Another 100 dead. Ironhall watched through his binoculars as Murdoch's troops repositioned, saw them laughing, actually laughing, like this was sport, like American lives were a game. Something cold settled in Ironhall's chest. He'd fought the Dominion twice before. Won both times through discipline, through patience, through refusing to take the bait. But watching his men die without fighting back, watching that Scottish bastard laugh while boys bled out in the dirt. "General Ironhall," Ravencroft's voice over encrypted command channel. "Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. That's exactly what they want." Ironhall knew that, understood it perfectly. Murdoch was executing a textbook provocation, drawing American forces out of defensive position, breaking formation through emotional manipulation rather than tactical superiority. It was obvious, transparent, the oldest trick in warfare, and Garrett Ironhall, the American shield, the man who'd beaten the Dominion twice, the general who never made mistakes, made one. "Mount up," he said quietly. His lieutenant stared. "Sir?" "I said mount up." Ironhall's voice carried steel. 5,000 cavalry, fast strike, we're taking Murdoch down." "Sir," President Ravencroft ordered, "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Lieutenant. Mount up." The order rippled through the right flank. 5,000 soldiers, regular Army, National Guard, Virginia Volunteers, mounted horses and armored vehicles, checked weapons, prepared to charge. Ironhall's radio exploded. "Garrett!" Ravencroft's voice, desperate now. "Stand down! That's a direct order. Stand down!" Ironhall switched off the radio, looked at his troops. Saw boys who'd watched their friends die. Saw men who wanted revenge. Saw faces twisted with rage and fear, and the desperate need to do something, anything, except stand and take punishment. He saw himself reflected in their eyes, and he made his choice. "For America," Ironhall said. "For everyone we've lost. For everyone counting on us." He drew his sidearm. "Charge!" 5,000 voices roared as one. Horses thundered across hardened dirt. Armored vehicles accelerated. The entire right flank of the American army broke formation and surged toward Murdoch's position like a tidal wave. And for 30 glorious seconds, it felt like victory. They hit Murdoch's unit like a hammer. American cavalry smashed into Dominion lines with enough force to shatter bones. Ironhall fired his weapon until the slide locked back empty, then used it as a club. Around him, his troops fought with the fury of men who'd been holding back too long. Murdoch's soldiers scattered, retreated, ran. "They're breaking!" someone screamed. "They're running!" Ironhall saw Dominion soldiers fleeing, saw them dropping weapons, saw panic in their movements, saw victory within reach. "After them!" his lieutenant yelled. "Don't let them escape!" The American cavalry pursued. 1 kilometer, 2, 3, getting farther from the main defensive line with every second, getting farther from support, getting farther from safety. And that's when Ironhall realized, oh God, no, they weren't running. They were leading. "Stop!" he screamed into his radio. "Fall back, it's a trap! Fall back now!" Too late. From both flanks, hidden Dominion units emerged. Not the 3,000 they'd been chasing. 25,000 fresh troops that had been concealed in the forests under thermal camouflage, waiting. Waiting for someone stupid enough to chase. Waiting for someone emotional enough to break formation. Waiting for Garrett Ironhall to make the exact mistake he'd spent 2 years teaching others to avoid. The trap closed like jaws. 5,000 American soldiers 3 kilometers from their main line, surrounded by 5 times their number. Cut off, isolated, dead. Ironhall's radio came alive with Ravencroft's voice. Didn't sound angry, sounded broken. "Zach," the president used his first name, first time in 2 years. "Zach, what did you do?" Ironhall couldn't answer. Couldn't breathe. Could only watch as the mathematics of warfare played out in real time. 25,000 Dominion troops formed a perfect encirclement. Artillery repositioned to prevent rescue attempts. Drone swarms launched to cut off any American reinforcement. Professional, precise, perfect. Ironhall looked at his troops, saw understanding dawn on their faces, saw the moment they realized they'd been played, that their general had led them into a slaughter, that they were going to die. "Form defensive circle," Ironhall ordered. "Backs together, we hold here." His soldiers obeyed. 5,000 Americans formed a ring, weapons pointing outward. Vehicles arranged for cover. Every man checking ammunition, assessing casualties, preparing for what came next. The Dominion didn't attack immediately. They just waited, tightened the circle, let the Americans understand their situation, let fear do its work. Ironhall keyed his radio. "Mr. President, I fucked up. I'm sorry. I got them killed." Silence on the other end. Then, "Can you break out?" "No, sir." "Can I send reinforcements?" "No, sir. They've got anti-air active. Artillery zeroed. Anyone you send dies before they reach us." Another pause. "Then hold as long as you can," Ravencroft said quietly. "Make them pay for every inch. Make your stand count for something." "Yes, sir?" Ironhall's voice cracked. "Sir, tell my daughter—" "I will." The radio went silent. Ironhall looked at his troops. 5,000 faces, some crying, some praying, some just staring at the enemy with the kind of calm that comes from accepting death. "Listen to me," Ironhall said. His voice carried across the circle. "I led you here. I made the call. This is my fault, my responsibility, my failure." He dismounted, stood in the center of the circle. "But we're here now, and the Dominion is about to learn something they've forgotten. Americans don't surrender. Americans don't beg. When we die fighting. We die free. We die standing." He chambered a round in his rifle. "So let's show these bastards what it costs to kill Americans." A roar went up from 5,000 throats. Not fear, not despair, defiance. The Dominion attack began. Artillery fell like rain. Explosions tore through the American circle. Bodies flew. Blood sprayed. The ground shook with each impact. Ironhall fired at shadows, reloaded, fired again. Around him, his troops held the line. Held it even as their numbers dwindled, even as friends died screaming, even as ammunition ran low and hope ran out. They held. 1 hour became 2, 5,000 became 3,000, 3,000 became 1,500, 1,500 became 800. Still they fought. The Dominion lost soldiers too, not many, but enough. Enough that their commanders noticed, enough that Aldrich Wolfborn himself rode closer to observe. This wasn't supposed to be difficult. 5,000 surrounded troops should have died in 30 minutes, should have broken, should have begged for mercy. Instead, they'd been fighting for 3 hours. Instead, they'd killed nearly 2,000 Dominion soldiers. Instead, they showed no signs of surrender. Wolfborn watched through his binoculars, saw an American general, had to be Ironhall, the one who'd won at Manitoba, fighting hand-to-hand with a combat knife after his rifle ran dry. Saw him kill 3 Dominion soldiers in 15 seconds. Saw him rally his remaining troops with nothing but force of will. Remarkable. Wolfborn raised his hand. The attack paused. Dominion forces pulled back slightly, created a gap in the encirclement. Wolfborn rode forward and, alone, under white flag. On the American side, Ironhall stood surrounded by bodies. His uniform soaked with blood, his own and others. His face covered in dirt and powder burns. Only 300 American soldiers left alive, most wounded, all exhausted, but still standing. Wolfborn stopped 20 meters away, close enough to speak, far enough to retreat if needed. "General Ironhall," he called out. British accent, cultured, the voice of someone educated at Oxford before the Dominion burned it. "I know who you are. The American Shield, Manitoba, Siveston. You've fought brilliantly." Ironhall said nothing, just stared. "You've lost this engagement," Wolfborn continued, "but you've fought with extraordinary courage. You and your men have earned respect, so I'm offering you something I rarely offer." He gestured to the gap in the encirclement. "Surrender, walk away. I'll make you a general in the Dominion military. When we take Washington, and we will take Washington, I'll make you governor of the Eastern Territories. You can protect your people, minimize casualties, rule in my father's name with honor and dignity." The offer hung in the air. Ironhall looked at his remaining troops, 300 faces, boys who'd followed him into hell, men who'd trusted him, soldiers who deserved better than dying for a general's mistake. He could save them. All he had to do was betray everything he'd fought for. Betray Ravencroft. Betray America. Betray himself. Ironhall looked back at Wolfborn, smiled, blood on his teeth. "I served Thaddeus Ravencroft," he said clearly. "I live for him, or I die for him. There's nothing else to discuss." He raised his rifle, charged, alone. Wolfborn's eyes widened, not expecting that, not expecting a man to choose death over survival. The Dominion guards raised weapons. Ironhall fired as he ran, dropped 2 guards, 3, 4, 20 meters became 10, 10 became 5. He was going to reach Wolfborn, going to kill him, going to take the Dominion commander with him into death. 4 meters, 3. Wolfborn drew his sidearm, 2 meters. Ironhall's rifle clicked empty. He dropped it, drew his combat knife. 1 meter. Wolfborn fired, missed. The range too close, the angle wrong, Ironhall moving too fast. Ironhall tackled him. Both men went down, rolled in the dirt, struggled for dominance. Wolfborn was younger, fresher, trained by the best combat instructors in the Dominion military. But Ironhall was desperate, furious, fighting with the strength of a man who had nothing left to lose. They grappled. Ironhall got on top, raised his knife. Wolfborn blocked, grabbed Ironhall's wrist. For 3 seconds they were frozen, knife inches from Wolfborn's throat. Neither man able to overpower the other. Then Ironhall did something unexpected. He headbutted Wolfborn. Once, twice, broke his nose, blood sprayed. Wolfborn's grip loosened, just enough. Ironhall drove the knife down, not at the throat. Too much bone, too much protection. The shoulder, left side, near the neck, where the subclavian artery ran close to the surface. The blade sank deep, 6 inches of carbon steel disappearing into flesh. Wolfborn screamed. His guards finally reacted. Opened fire. 17 bullets hit Garrett Ironhall in 3 seconds. He fell, lay on cold earth, staring at the sky. Thought about his daughter, hoped she'd understand. Hoped history would remember this meant something. His last words, barely a whisper, "Worth it." Then nothing. Chaos erupted in the Dominion lines. Medics rushed to Wolfborn, pulled out the knife. Blood poured from the wound. Not arterial spray, Ironhall had missed the major vessel by millimeters, but deep, dangerous, the kind of injury that needed immediate surgical intervention. Field medics did what they could, packed the wound, applied pressure, administered clotting agents. But they were in the middle of a battlefield. No hospital, no proper surgical equipment, just combat medicine designed for minor injuries, not deep, penetrating trauma. Wolfborn's second in command, a colonel whose name didn't matter, took control, ordered the remaining American troops executed, all 300. No prisoners, no mercy. It took 10 minutes. When it was done, 5,000 American soldiers lay dead on December ground 3 kilometers from their main line. And Aldrich Wolfborn lay on a medical cot, fever already beginning, infection already spreading through his bloodstream. The Dominion turned toward the main American army. Thaddeus Ravencroft watched from the center line as the Dominion force reformed. Watched them prepare for the main assault, knew that without Ironhall, without his best general, his chances of victory had just dropped from slim to non-existent. "All units," he said quietly, "prepare for engagement. They're coming." The Dominion came, 60,000 troops minus the 4,000 they'd lost in the encirclement. Still a massive numerical advantage, still superior tactics, still undefeated. They hit the American center line like a tsunami. Artillery bombardment, drone swarms, infantry assault, everything the Dominion had learned in 15 years of conquest, brought to bear on a defensive line held by soldiers who'd just watched their best general die. But the American line didn't break. Stonemark's heavy infantry absorbed the first assault, held position, returned fire. Artillery units coordinated defensive barrages. Drone countermeasures worked overtime. Ravencroft fought personally, not directing from safety, actually fighting, rifle in hand, shooting Dominion soldiers, rallying his troops through example. Say what you want about Thaddeus Ravenscroft. Call him a murderer, call him a tyrant, call him a usurper who killed his way to power. But nobody could call him a coward. The battle raged for 6 hours. 8,000 Americans died. 5,000 Dominion troops died. Neither side broke. As the sun set on December 22nd, both armies pulled back, exhausted, bloodied, damaged but not destroyed. Ironhall's sacrifice had bought them one thing: time. In the American camp that night, Ravenscroft met with his surviving commanders. Stonemark had lost his right arm to shrapnel. Winterbourne had taken a bullet through the shoulder, both still alive, still functional. Casualties? Ravenscroft asked. 13,000 total, Winterbourne reported. 5 from Ironhall's encirclement, 8 from the main engagement. Dominion? 9,000 estimated, maybe more. Ravenscroft closed his eyes, did the math. The Dominion could sustain those losses. America couldn't. "Sir," Stonemark said, "we should retreat, fall back to Washington, use the defenses." "No." Ravenscroft's voice carried absolute certainty. "If I move, it will only be forward. Tomorrow we fight again." In the Dominion camp, Aldrich Wolfborn lay on a cot, slipping in and out of consciousness. The wound had been cleaned, stitched, bandaged. But infection had already set in. His temperature climbed to 104 degrees. Field medics administered antibiotics. Didn't help. The bacteria was resistant, or the wound was too deep, or battlefield medicine simply wasn't enough. Wolfborn's fever climbed higher. His second-in-command faced an impossible choice. Continue the assault with a dying commander, or retreat? December 23rd passed in stalemate. Small skirmishes, no major engagement. Both armies watching, waiting. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Still no battle. The silence was eerie, unnatural. In the Dominion camp, Wolfborn could barely speak. The infection had spread to his bloodstream, sepsis. Medieval battlefield medicine had no answer for advanced bacterial infection. He was dying. His officers held an emergency meeting. The math was brutal. They were low on supplies after 6 months of marching. Local food sources had been evacuated or destroyed. American reinforcements were approaching from the west, and their commander was dying. For the first time in 15 years, a Dominion army considered retreat. On the night of December 24th, they made their decision. At 3 a.m, Christmas Day, the Dominion began withdrawing, quietly, professionally, under cover of darkness. By dawn, they were gone. American scouts discovered the empty camp at sunrise. For a moment, nobody believed it. Then someone started shouting, "They're gone! They retreated! We won!" The victory cry spread through the American army like wildfire. Soldiers embraced, wept, collapsed from exhaustion and relief. They'd survived. Washington had survived. America had survived. Thaddeus Ravenscroft stood alone in his command tent, staring at satellite feeds showing Dominion forces retreating north. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just looked at the casualty reports. 13,000 American dead, including Garrett Ironhall, the man who'd saved Washington by wounding Aldrich Wolfborn, the man who'd disobeyed direct orders, the man who'd gotten 5,000 soldiers killed, the man whose sacrifice had turned the tide of battle. Ravenscroft picked up a pen, began writing the official after-action report. He wrote about the battle, about casualties, about tactical decisions. He wrote about Stonemark's heroic defense, about Winterbourne's brilliant coordination. He wrote about the mysterious Dominion retreat, about American perseverance, about freedom prevailing over tyranny. He did not write about Garrett Ironhall. Not once, not ever. The American shield, the man who'd beaten the Dominion twice, the general whose final act saved the nation, was erased from history before his body was cold. Because Thaddeus Ravenscroft understood something that idealists never could. Discipline matters more than heroism. Orders matter more than courage. And disobedience, even heroic disobedience, cannot be rewarded. Not if you want to maintain an army. not if you want to survive. So Garrett Ironhall disappeared from the official record, became a classified casualty, a number in a spreadsheet, a grave with no name. His daughter would never know how he really died. History would never record his sacrifice. And America would go on living, protected by a hero it had already forgotten. The Dominion retreated north, carrying their dying commander. Aldrich Wolfborn would last another 3 weeks before sepsis finally killed him. But that's a story for another time. For now, on Christmas morning 2027, America celebrated survival. And in Arlington National Cemetery, workers prepared a grave marker that read simply, "Unknown Soldier, Battle of Kensington." The man who saved Washington, the hero with no name, the warrior who understood that sometimes courage means dying for people who'll never know your sacrifice. Garrett Ironhall was gone, but his legacy had just begun. Snow fell on Wyoming in mid-January. Silent, white, pure. Aldrich Wolfborn lay in a medical transport somewhere between the Montana border and the Wyoming wilderness, and he was dying. The fever had climbed to 107 degrees. His shoulder wound had turned black around the edges, necrosis spreading, tissue dying. The infection had entered his bloodstream 3 days ago, and now it was everywhere. In his lungs, his kidneys, his brain. Sepsis. The medical term sounded clinical, professional, like something that could be treated with the right antibiotics, the right surgery, the right hospital. But there were no hospitals out here, no surgical theaters, no intensive care units with machines that could filter blood and administer IV antibiotics and monitor vital signs every second. Just a converted cargo truck with basic field medical equipment and 3 medics who knew their patient was beyond saving. Wolfborn drifted in and out of consciousness. When he was awake, he saw faces. His father, Supreme Chancellor Magnus Wolfborn, sitting in the war room at Ironhold, reviewing casualty reports. His mother, dead 15 years, smiling at him from a memory so old it might have been someone else's life. His troops, 60,000 strong, watching him fail. And Garrett Ironhall, always Ironhall. That last moment played on repeat in Wolfborn's fevered mind, the American general charging, alone, suicidal, brave beyond comprehension. That combat knife rising, falling, biting deep, 6 inches of steel changing the course of history. "Commander," one of the medics leaned close. Young woman. Couldn't have been more than 25. "Can you hear me?" Wolfborn's lips moved. No sound came out. His hand moved weakly toward the encrypted radio. The medic understood, helped him key the channel. Static. Then his father's voice. "Aldrich." Not a question, just acknowledgement. The Supreme Chancellor didn't waste words on sentiment. "I'm sorry," Wolfborn whispered. Each word cost him. "Failed you. Failed the Dominion. Failed everything." Silence on the other end. Then, "You didn't fail. America was always going to be difficult. The Americans have something we forgot, something we lost when we started winning too easily." "What?" "Desperation. They're fighting for survival. We're fighting for expansion. There's a difference." Wolfborn's vision blurred. The General Ironhall, he was worthy opponent. "I know. Tell the historians. Tell them he fought with honor. Tell them he deserved better than dying on—" The words stopped. Not because Wolfborn chose to stop speaking, because he'd run out of time. His heart beat twice more, then stopped. January 15th, 2028, somewhere in Wyoming. Aldrich Wolfborn, son of the Supreme Chancellor, commander of the greatest invasion force ever assembled against America, died from a knife wound inflicted by a man who disobeyed orders to give him that wound. The medics performed CPR for 20 minutes, knowing it was futile. Doing it anyway because protocol demanded it, because hope dies hard, because sometimes you have to try even when trying is pointless. When they finally stopped, the convoy kept moving. 6 weeks later, the convoy crossed into Dominion-held Alaska. From there, transport to the Arctic capital. Supreme Chancellor Magnus Wolfborn received his son's body in the Hall of Conquerors. Didn't weep, didn't rage, just stood there, 65 years old, looking at the closed casket and understanding that his legacy would die with him. Because Aldrich had been his only child, his only heir, the only person he'd trusted to continue what he'd built. Gone. Killed by a single act of disobedience, by one American general who'd broken formation and charged and driven a knife into the one vulnerable spot that mattered. Magnus Wolfborn declared 30 days of mourning. Then he called his military advisors to the war room and asked a question that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. Can we conquer America? His generals looked at each other. None wanted to answer. Finally, his oldest advisor spoke. Theoretically, yes. We have superior numbers, superior technology, superior tactics, but at what cost, Chancellor? The Battle of Kensington cost us 9,000 troops for a strategic withdrawal. If every American city fights like Washington fought, the mathematics become unfavorable. We'd win, eventually, but it would take years, decades. And the casualties would destroy us, Magnus finished. We'd conquer America and have nothing left to hold the rest of our empire. Silence. And there's another problem, the advisor continued. Word is spreading. About Kensington, about our retreat. Resistance movements in Europe are using it as propaganda. The Dominion bled in Maryland. If Americans can beat them, we can too. Magnus Wolfborn understood. The aura of invincibility, that psychological weapon that had been more powerful than any army, was gone. Broken by one battle, one American general, one knife wound. Withdraw all forces from American territory, Magnus ordered. Consolidate. Focus on holding what we have. America can wait. The war for America was over. The Dominion would try again over the next 2 years, but each invasion failed. By 2041, Magnus Wolfborn would be dead, assassinated by his own generals. By 2045, the empire would be dust. But that was years away. For now, in January 2028, an empire mourned its prince, and in America, a president prepared to erase a hero. The Oval Office smelled like old books and new lies. Thaddeus Ravencroft sat behind the resolute desk, staring at a draft report. Dr. Lillian Wycliffe, White House chief historian, stood before him, 45 years old, appointed by Jonathan Ravencroft back when the position still meant something. She held the official Battle of Kensington report. Ravencroft had read it 3 times. It's well written, he said, comprehensive, detailed, accurate. Thank you, Mr. President. But it mentions General Ironhall 47 times. Wycliffe blinked. Yes, sir. He commanded the right flank. His actions directly led to... His disobedience directly led to 5,000 American deaths, Ravencroft interrupted. His violation of direct orders nearly cost us the battle. His emotional decision-making demonstrated exactly the kind of behavior that destroys military discipline. Sir, with respect, his wound to Commander Wolfborn was accidental. Lucky. Not strategic brilliance, Doctor. Just a desperate man making a desperate move that happened to work out. Wycliffe stared. You can't be serious. Ravencroft stood, walked to the window, looked out at Washington, the city that had nearly burned, the capital that existed because Garrett Ironhall had disobeyed orders and charged an enemy commander and driven a knife into his shoulder. I'm very serious, Doctor. The official history of the Battle of Kensington will state the following facts. The Dominion attacked. American forces held defensive positions. Commander Wolfborn was wounded during the main engagement. The Dominion withdrew due to supply shortages and command disruption. General Stonemark is to be commended for his heroic defense, Colonel Winterbourne for her tactical coordination. He turned back to face her. General Garrett Ironhall is not to be mentioned. Not once. Not ever. He died in action, location classified, circumstances classified. That's the official record. Mr. President, Wycliffe's voice shook. You're asking me to erase the man who saved Washington. I'm ordering you to maintain military discipline, to ensure that future generals understand that orders matter. That chain of command matters, even if it means forgetting a hero. Wycliffe set the report on the desk. I won't do this. Then you're fired. She walked to the door, stopped, turned back. History will remember this, Mr. President. Eventually, someone will find the truth, and when they do, your erasure will look exactly like what it is. Cowardice disguised as leadership. Perhaps, Ravencroft said, but I'll be dead by then, and America will still be alive. That's the trade I'm making. Wycliffe left. 2 hours later, a new chief historian was appointed. The official Battle of Kensington report was published in February 2028, 47 pages. 0 mentions of Garrett Ironhall, as if he'd never existed. That night, Thaddeus Ravencroft drove to Arlington National Cemetery alone. The headstone read, Unknown Soldier, Battle of Kensington, December 22, 2027. Ravencroft knelt, placed a Medal of Honor on the grave. I'm sorry, Zach, he whispered, but you saved Washington. You saved America, and I swear to you, I will not waste that gift. He stood, saluted, left. The medal was removed by security 4 hours later, catalogued, filed, forgotten, just like the man it was meant to honor. The Dominion attacked America 3 more times between 2028 and 2030. Each invasion failed. Sacramento, Alaska, Montana border. Each retreat further damaged their reputation. Each defeat inspired resistance movements across their crumbling empire. Thaddeus Ravencroft served 3 terms as president, 2025 to 2037. 12 years of iron rule defending America while transforming it into something his uncle wouldn't recognize. He died in 2037 of a heart attack, 49 years old. Worked himself to death trying to justify the murders that gave him power. His state funeral drew millions. They built monuments to him, named schools after him, called him the president who saved America. And nobody mentioned the 17 people he'd murdered at Camp David. History is written by survivors. And Thaddeus Ravencroft survived long enough to control the narrative. Almost. 2045, 18 years after the Battle of Kensington. Dr. Owen Radcliffe, 32 years old, independent historian at UCLA, noticed something odd while researching the Dominion War. The official casualty figures for Kensington listed 8,000 American dead, but Arlington burial records showed 13,000 soldiers with Battle of Kensington death dates, 5,000 missing. He dug deeper, found classified supply requisitions, food, ammunition, medical supplies all dated December 22, 2027. All shipped to a unit that didn't exist in the official records. The Right Flank Division, 12,000 troops, commander classified. Radcliffe spent 6 months filing Freedom of Information requests. Every single one denied. Classified for national security reasons. He interviewed veterans, old men now. Most wouldn't talk, too much trauma. But a few whispered stories about a general named Ironhall, about a charge that should never have happened, about 5,000 men surrounded and dying and fighting anyway, about a commander who refused surrender and killed a Dominion prince. Radcliffe couldn't find any official confirmation, no records, no reports, no mentions in any government document. Then he got a package, anonymous sender, no return address. Inside, a journal, leather-bound, water-damaged, blood-stained. The first page read, Property of General Garrett Ironhall, United States Army. Radcliffe's hands shook as he read the final entry, dated December 22, 2027, 6 a.m. If I die today, let it mean something. Let it protect my daughter's future. Let it prove Americans don't surrender. Ravencroft will probably erase me from the records if I fuck up. But that's okay. Heroes don't need monuments. They just need to do what's right. Whatever happens today, I die free. That's enough. Radcliffe read those words 10 times. Then he started writing. Du tuk stantiai keturias deshimt sheshtas. The Forgotten Hero, General Garrett Ironhall and the Battle of Kensington, published by Oxford University Press. It became a bestseller overnight. Public outrage erupted. Congressional hearings were called. Classified documents declassified. The full story emerged. Ironhall's daughter, now 42 years old, gave her first public interview. "My father came to me the night before the battle," she said, voice breaking. "Told me he loved me. Told me that if he didn't come back, it meant he died protecting my future. For 18 years, I thought he died in some classified operation. Now I know the truth. He died saving Washington, saving America, saving me, and the president he died for erased him like he never existed." Tears streamed down her face. "I don't need statues of my father. I just need people to know he existed, to know he fought, to know he stood between darkness and everyone I love, and he didn't break." The interview had 100 million views in 24 hours, 2,047. Congress passed a resolution acknowledging General Garrett Ironhall's service and sacrifice. It passed unanimously. 2048, January 15th. 20 years to the day after Aldrich Wolfborn died. The National Mall, Washington, D.C., a statue unveiling, bronze, 15 feet tall. A man in combat uniform, knife raised, charging forward with the kind of desperate courage that comes from knowing you're going to die and doing it anyway. The inscription? General Garrett Ironhall, 1982 to 2027. I serve Thaddeus Ravencroft. I live for him or I die for him. His disobedience saved America. His sacrifice wounded an empire. His truth outlived tyrants. Heroes don't need monuments to matter, but we build them anyway, so we never forget. 500,000 people attended. His daughter spoke, 44 years old now, streaks of gray in her dark hair. Her father's eyes. "My father knew he'd be forgotten," she began. "Knew President Ravencroft would erase him, wrote it in his journal the morning he died, but he charged anyway, fought anyway, died anyway. Because here's what President Ravencroft never understood. You can erase someone from official records. You can remove their name from history books. You can pretend they never existed. But you can't erase truth. Truth survives. Truth waits. Truth outlasts every tyrant who tries to bury it." She smiled through tears. "It took 18 years, but truth won. My father's story survived, and now I can finally say the words I've wanted to say since I was 24 years old." She looked up at the bronze figure. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for dying free. Thank you for showing me that doing the right thing matters more than being remembered for it." The cloth fell away. 500,000 people stood in silence. Then, slowly, they began to applaud. It lasted 17 minutes. 1 minute for each person Thaddeus Ravencroft murdered. 1 minute for each year Garrett Ironhall was erased from history. When it stopped, the crowd dispersed, but a single figure remained. Dr. Owen Radcliffe stood before the statue, holding the journal. "I found your truth, General," he said quietly. "Made sure the world knows. Made sure your daughter understands. Made sure you're remembered." He placed the journal at the base of the statue. A museum would collect it later. Preserve it. Display it. Radcliffe walked away. Behind him, the statue stood silent. Bronze general, frozen charge, eternal reminder that courage matters more than recognition, that sacrifice outlasts erasure, that truth eventually always wins. In the growing darkness, 500,000 people made their way home through Washington's streets. The city Garrett Ironhall had saved. The capital that existed because one man chose to die free rather than live broken. His name was forgotten for 18 years, but his legacy never died. And now, standing watch over the National Mall, the American shield would remember that for all of us, forever charging, forever fighting, forever free.